fellow travelers, and welcome to the Versus Stars podcast. All my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. And remember, click subscribe on everybody. This is an amazing episode because Dennis Culver boards the mothership. He's the writer of the Unstoppable Doom Patrol from DC Comics. Come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Culver. Thank you so much for coming to the Versus Stars podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's a total honor to speak with you, sir. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, man. I'm glad to be here.
So I always start off with a question of inspirations. What inspired your love of comics and who your earliest influences?
Oh man. I got indoctrinated really early into comics. Like there was obviously like TV shows, Superman movie, Batman TV show, like stuff like that. But when I was a kid, I lived in Florida, and SeaWorld, we went as a family, and I was 4 years old, and they do a superhero water ski show back then. I don't know if you can see pictures of it online. But the really cool thing was after that show, when you're coming out of the stadium, there was people dressed as superheroes handing out comics. So they handed me, I think it was Batman 323, which is like Batman and Catwoman on the cover. So I got real early into comics, and I was drawing as a kid at 4 years old too. So it all kind of started rolling there. And then I think once like G.I. Joe and X-Men kind of hit my radar, those were the books where I was really just rabid fan for it. So it was part of, it was the drawing of it. And then, just like really just being excited about all the characters and stuff. And then I've just been a fan and wanting to make my own comics ever since.
That's a promotion they should start doing. I think sometimes there isn't enough comic book promotion out there for what's going to keep for the newer generations.
Yeah, for sure. I like what they're doing with the latest DC trailers, like putting the images of the comics that are available, at the end and stuff like that. I mean, anything that you can do to kind of like bring in the next generation of readers is always a good idea.
So you're the upcoming writer of the Unstoppable Doom Patrol. So how do you get involved in the series, and what interests you in the property?
Well, I was talking to my editor, Ben Abernathy, about what was going to come next after Future State Gotham. And we kind of just got to talking. Chris Burnham, who's the artist on Unstoppable Doom Patrol, him and I have been in a studio together for a few years. We've known each other for 8 years now. And Ben was suggesting, he's like, well, you and Burnham should do something together. And I was like, that's a good idea. And then just through Ben and I's conversations, I started talking about, I had a story idea rather for Robot Man. That ultimately became like issue 3 of the series. And then I just kind of got off on a rant of like, Doom Patrol should be a bigger part of the DC universe, and like kind of just talking about all that stuff. And Ben finally said, he's like, well, you and Burnham should do Doom Patrol. And I was like, that's a good idea. And so I texted Burnham and I was like, you into this? And he's like, hell yeah. And so then we just kind of got rolling from there.
So for people who love Doom Patrol, there's obviously was a very famous Grant Morrison run. And there's also a very popular HBO Max TV series on Doom Patrol. So in your vision, how have you differentiated your version of Doom Patrol from what has come before it?
Well, I think if you look at all the Doom Patrol comics that have been out there, in my mind, all of that happened. Like that's just a part of the team's history. I think that our book is the natural progression of all of that. And so if you look at like these characters and what they've been through, I think a lot of the underlying theme has been these characters dealing with the trauma that has turned them into what they are in their lives, and then processing and dealing with that trauma. When you get to the end of the previous run, which was the Gerard Way and Nick Darrington run, I think you can argue that a lot of those characters are finding their healing, and they're coming to a place of healing. They're not perfect, but they've definitely have grown since when they first appeared. And I think when you've dealt with and processed your trauma and you've healed, like it's a natural instinct to kind of want to help others do the same. And so that's where we come in when we find our new series. Our tagline is saving the world by saving the monsters. And so the Doom Patrol are out there. They're kind of like superhero first responders. Their colors that they wear now are orange and white. Like it's very evocative of they're the first ones on the scene. They're not trying to punch the character in the jaw, though. The supervillain. They're trying to help them and help them deal with their new abilities and try to see if there's a better way to come to a better resolution.
So is the primary conflict these monsters that they're trying to save, or is it those who are trying to stop them from saving the monsters?
That's an interesting question. So in the DC universe, if you're a metahuman, which is you've got not everybody, but a lot of people have something called a metagene. And the metagene is usually sparked by an accident or some kind of trauma. So you can look at the Flash. He's struck by lightning, and all those chemicals spilled on him, and suddenly he's got super speed. Firestorm, is created from that accident with the nuclear reactor. All of those things, those accidents triggered their metagene. That's kind of what happened there. And so during the Lazarus Planet crossover, there was this Lazarus rain that was wreaking havoc on the whole world. Basically, because of that, there are more metahumans now than ever. And if you're a metahuman, if that's something that happens to you in the DC universe, it's not likely that you become a superhero. It's not really even likely you become a supervillain. Like sometimes you just become a problem. Like if you're an out of control metahuman and the Justice League show up and they contain you and they deal with that, the best place you're going to end up is Star Labs, which is, it's a laboratory. You're going to end up somewhere where they're conducting experiments on you, trying to fix you, which may or may not help. The worst option is maybe you go to something like Arkham Asylum, right, where you become a worse monster, or there are terrible people there that you become the victim of. And then the very, very worst case scenario in the DC universes where you're metahuman is you end up in something like the Suicide Squad, where they put a bomb in your head and they make you a weapon for the government. And so none of those options are great. And so what the Doom Patrol is looking to do is their new base, which we'll see in issue 2, is something they call the Shelter. And it's a place to take metahumans and help them learn to live with their new abilities. Not necessarily become soldiers in some kind of war, but like if you suddenly your powers trigger and you have tentacles for arms, for instance, you got to learn basic stuff like learning how to tie your shoes and things like that. So they're helping that. But also, this base now is just becoming this place full of what the government considers weapons of mass destruction. So now they're in conflict with a lot of other things because they don't agree with how Justice League and members of the Justice League are dealing with metahumans. The government a lot of times wants to make metahumans weapons. There's other nefarious people that we'll see in our run who want to use and exploit metahumans. So it is less about the monster and it's more the people that want to destroy or exploit those monsters.
So the interesting is that the Doom Patrol, you said the Shelter, is now this occupying area of these, as you said, potential weapons of mass destruction. So they become, in many ways, this receptacle of potentially the most powerful beings around. How do other groups, the government, Justice League, feel about this now localization of all these great weapons in the hands of the Doom Patrol?
Yeah, it becomes a problem. The government very early will see they are trying to find a way to shut the Doom Patrol down. In our first issue, the team goes to Gotham City to help a new metahuman, and Batman doesn't like when other superheroes comes to the city, so they're immediately in conflict. In issue 3, which the solicits are already out, they're helping a metahuman who is wanted by the Green Lanterns, and so they're like being chased across the country as they're trying to get this metahuman to safety. It just puts them in conflict in an interesting way in the DC universe. So they're firmly a part of it, but they stand apart from the traditional superheroes.
So these metas that they're helping, how many of them are looking for help, and how many of them are happily not being helpful, as it were?
I think there are a lot of metahumans in the DC universe that are just in hiding because they're outcasts from society. I put it in some of the early solicit material is they're ticking time bombs, and the Doom Patrol isn't there to stop them. They're there to defuse them and help them integrate and learn to live with their disabilities and turn them into abilities and be able to live in a society where they're not in hiding. There's a lot of story potential there of that going, good or bad. So that's kind of the stuff that we'll dig into as the series progresses.
So what is it about the Doom Patrol that makes them able to be helps to these metahumans? What are their qualifications for that role?
Well, I mean, they are literally monsters that have gone through this stuff. All of the Doom Patrol's characters, their origins are rooted in trauma. They, the initial group, Niles Calder was the one that kind of secretly had caused the accidents that a lot of them that it endured that made them superheroes, but also he's uniquely able to, he's like the world's greatest superhero surgeon, and he kind of specializes in metahumans. He's still a part of the team. He's no longer the leader. He kind of acts in a consultant role. So they're it's almost like a community organized group of superpowered people trying to help others. And then as we get deeper into the series, we'll see how characters that have been a part of the group before are taking on different kinds of support roles, like Flex Mentallo is a natural fit for physical therapy and things like that. So we'll see all that come together.
And one of the new team members is someone called Degenerate. So what does he bring? What does he bring to the table?
Well, he's a new metahuman that is they find and has been exploited by a group. He's someone that they essentially save, and he ends up joining them. He's a little bit reluctant to join. He joins because he has no better option. He brings a little conflict to the group, but also his powers are something that we really haven't seen before. It's basically the only way they work is if he's mean. And so and the meaner he gets, the more he devolves, he gets bigger, he gets a little dumber too. So he has to be careful because he can easily get out of control. He's kind of like a dick Hulk. If you
So that make him more of a help or more of a threat?
There's going to be conflict, but he's reluctant to join. He's not really happy to be there, but it's that's the process, right? Like you start out not wanting to heal, and then through learning and being with this group, he'll hopefully get better.
So that's a fascinating thing that his power is to be basically a jerk. By becoming a jerk, how does a team deal with a team member who has to be a jackass in order to have power? I mean, do they kind of like let it go that this is what he has to do, or do they think he really is a jackass?
Yeah. I mean, imagine that being a part of your life. It's like dealing with someone who is intentionally doing that. And that's the thing about his powers is that we'll kind of get into when we meet him, is that he doesn't have to use his powers, and it's the kind of thing where it's like he's kind of choosing that, so he's like almost willing to be mean because it gives him power. And I think it's a fascinating thing to explore with a character.
I think so too. When him being, is it for has the powers work? Is it the intention of being an asshole, or is the more angry he makes the person he's being an asshole to is what gives him the power?
Yeah, it's not a reaction; it's a choice. Obviously, if you're angry, you're pissed off, you're going to be mean. But it's there is kind of just even to have his baseline, like the way we see him and his use of powers, he kind of has to kind of maintain a low level of dickishness to kind of keep that look going.
That is awesome. So another cool character is everyone knows Crazy Jane. But her new personality that she's using is called the Chief, and she's kind of like the leader of the team, and I guess the Chief is the lead personality. So what makes her qualified, or the Chief qualified, to lead the Doom Patrol?
Well, she's not the primary personality. That's still Jane.
Okay.
However, because she's leading the team, she's topside way more than Jane is comfortable with. So that creates a little internal conflict as well as external conflict, because the Chief is nothing like Jane. It's an alternate identity. And the Chief, is there for a reason, to lead the Doom Patrol, to help them on this new mission of saving the world by saving the monsters. She can be a little, terse. It's not, the relationship that this team has developed with Jane is suddenly changed, and they're having to kind of deal with that. She's not as malicious as Niles Calder was when he was a leader and having his like psychotic break, but she's someone who's a little more gruff and unexpected. It's kind of neat dealing with a character like Jane, because she has 64 alternate identities, and so a lot of times she'll bring up the appropriate identity to kind of help with any given situation.
So for us, the 64 personalities in her head, so she is the consensus choice for that, or do some of the personalities other than Jane really resent being called up when she feels like, or letting her be a leader? Do they all agree with her methods of being a leader as well?
Yeah, the chief coming up and taking this role was something that they all agreed on. It's just I think the terms of the deal aren't quite what Jane expected. Yeah.
Very cool. Assuming you can't reveal what the terms are.
Yeah, we'll get into it as we go. Like in the second issue, we touch on it a little bit too. So it'll, the way we structured this, because it's this initial series is 6 issues. The plan is to do 6 issues every year, kind of like a prestige season of television. But obviously it starts here, and you have to order this. And I'm telling people, pre-ordering is March 5th. But the best thing you can do is tell your comic shop to put the whole series on your pull list. But the other thing that we're doing is like the first 4 issues of the series are all done in 1 issues. And instead of a lot of times when you have a mini series, it's just 6 issues and it's 1 story. This has those done in 1 issues, and then the final 2 issues are a 2-part where it's kind of been building to that. So it feels really big, and we get to grow out the concept and kind of explore the different characters as we go too. So it's really neat the way it's come together. I think it's going to be really exciting.
Has it been challenging to try to balance a team of that size and giving each one opportunities to kind of like shine in their moments?
Well, that's when the done in 1 issues have helped, like even doing the little 10-page lead up that was in the Lazarus Planet Dark Fate special. We got to focus a little bit on Larry, and then the first issue we'll we focus a little bit on the newer characters, but like if you look at the cover to issue 3, it's just Larry and Cliff in a car together driving, so it's more focused on those two. So it definitely gives us an opportunity to kind of let those characters flesh out and develop too. And there are moments where we get to just like spend time in issue 2 when we kind of get into the nitty gritty of the shelter and how it works, and we get to see the different characters in their their personal lives and their private elements. So we get little character moments for everybody that are, I think, some really cool and surprising things. Also, you'll see familiar faces from previous runs as well.
So with all these new characters you're introducing as these monsters, are we looking at characters that may or may not make the roster? Or are they the characters that look thinking of like that spin off? I mean, do we have long-term plans for these characters we're interacting with?
Yeah, I would love to do more with them. There are definitely some newer recruits that would like to be a part of the main Doom Patrol team. Like we already saw Simon in the Lazarus Planet Dark Fate special. Like he's got a really interesting power set. And it ultimately comes down to it, being a choice. Some characters we might just meet for an issue. Some characters you'll see in issue 2, and they'll also end up popping up in issue 5 and things like that. So yeah, we'll populate them, and we're kind of building a world that's firmly set in the DC universe, but not something that you haven't really seen in the DC universe before.
Now, Degenerate, and I think Beast Girl is another new
Beast
character.
Girl, yeah.
Are these characters that were due to the rescue of the team, or do they come by the team in a different way?
Well, we don't know Beast Girl's origin yet, and we'll meet. We just kind of start with her already a member, and then Degenerate will meet in the series together. So it'll be like kind of using the concept of the book as he'll be like the primary example of that.
Very cool. And you said March 5th is when the book will first come out?
March 5th is when the final order cutoff is. So if you want the book, you need to let your comic shop know by March 5th, which is a Sunday, that you want to order the book. And then the book itself will be out on March 28th, which is the last week of the month.
Very cool. Do you have a minute to talk about Firestorm or no?
Oh yeah, we can talk about Firestorm.
All right, let's talk some Firestorm. He's actually one of my favorite characters. I definitely want to
talk awesome! I'm glad to hear that. Yeah,
yeah. I bought his issues. Every Firestorm a regular issue, so I'm very excited by the chance to talk with it. As we said, Firestorm recently showed up in Lazarus Planet Legends Reborn. So how did you get involved writing Firestorm? And where did you go? Which series did you go for inspiration? How to write them? Did you go to the Conway issues? Did you go to the Jason Rush issues? Which ones did you look at for inspiration?
Well, there is. It is something I would very much like to do a Firestorm series. I have a concept in mind, and this was kind of a preview of that. And this kind of started as me, talking to an editor about that, and he said, "Well, let's see what we can do in this Lazarus Planet special, and then kind of go from there." So it's up to the powers that be at that point. But I'm a fan of the character. I mean, I loved him when I was a kid when he showed up on like the Superpowers TV show back in the day.
Yep.
But yeah, I love the Conway run. And I love the Jason Rosh stuff. Like that stuff was really cool to me. I kind of have read every Firestorm appearance, as I'm sure you have too. Like, even the was it Justice League Task Force? Is that the one where he was in?
Oh, I'm trying to remember which one it was. I know there was that run that he had in when Jason and Ronnie were sharing the Matrix
Oh
for
no,
a
I'm
little
talking like
while.
the '90s before
Okay.
Jason came along.
Well,
Like
he was on JLA for a bit, the main JLA title. He came in around issue 72,
even before that,
73.
I'm going way back.
Okay, way back.
Yeah, like
Okay,
yeah, you remember when it was like Justice League Task Force, I think it was the comic. But it
okay.
was he was a member of that crew for a while. Um, but there's some interesting stuff with Ronnie's character there. A lot of people don't realize it. Like Ronnie's had dealt with like substance issues and things like that. Like he's kind of a dark character, even though he's like always kind of cracking jokes and stuff. And then
Hmm.
his relationship with Professor Stein running out of Doomsday Clock became very strained, which we pay a little reference to that as well. I'm a big fan of all your comics count, everything happens, and it's just figuring out how to make that all fit in the cosmology. Um, the other thing that I find interesting about Firestorm is there's a certain body horror element to it. And there's like, I would love to lean into more of a almost kind of horror series, or a series that's a little bit darker, kind of in the style of Immortal Hulk, that kind of explores that darker parts of Ronnie's character, that, and ultimately to build him up as like I think he's a superhero that should always be on the Justice League. I think he's one of the top superheroes in the DCU.
So and I agree with you. And I think for a little while in the 80s, he was really big. Why do you think he hasn't hung on the way I think he deserves to have over the last 20, 30 years?
I think he's a tough character to get right. Like you remember they did that weird run where like Professor Stein became like just on his own. He was like a fire elemental and all those
Yep.
things. And I think that was just a desire to kind of take Firestorm into almost, quasi Vertigo direction. I don't know, that was the best idea. And then it's just, I think people just have a hard time figuring it out. I think they always try to like, tone down the costume and things like that. And I'm just like, lean in, like this guy, he can make his costume look however he looks, and he wants to look like a swashbuckler. Let him, like I think it's, he's the kind of person where it's, Ronnie puts on this really happy face, but there's a dark character, and I think you can contrast those ideas. But I think that it's just, all the universe changes and all that, it got a little muddy. But I think if you can get him back down to like what makes Ronnie a good character, not just Firestorm, I think you can really build up that series and go from there.
Like I said, I do love the character. I'm actually the admin on the Firestorm Appreciation group on Facebook.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
So like I said, a big fan. So how is Dr. Ramirez different than Dr. Stein's going to be as the other Matrix personality?
That's an interesting question. So Dr. Ramirez, Professor Stein and Ronnie's relationship are very it's very terse because of the Doomsday Clock stuff. And then during the Lazarus Planet special, the Lazarus Rain disrupts the Matrix and it throws them apart. And because it was broken, Robbie wasn't even sure that he could become Firestorm again. And Dr. Ramirez, who's a scientist for Star Labs, is there on the scene. And basically, when a parademon emerges, it starts killing people, or shadow demon, I guess I should say. And they have to act fast, and they merge, and it's kind of risky when they come together. I think Dr. Ramirez is an interesting character. If we moved forward with a Firestorm series, he wouldn't be the final person to pair up with Ronnie, because this is just spoilers for that story. Because the Firestorm Matrix is broken, it actually steals time from whoever Ronnie is bonding with, and so if Ronnie's not careful, it will completely take all of the time from the person that he's bonding with. And so like you saw that happen with Professor Sign. He's very old at the end of the story because the Firestorm Matrix ate up all of his time. And he saw when they tried to come apart, Dr. Ramirez had the same thing. So we'd be exploring that and what happened. And then it becomes Ronnie has a problem that only he can solve as Firestorm, but the Firestorm Matrix will hurt anybody he merges with, and the only way he can become Firestorm is merge with someone. So what do you do?
Right.
Do you use these powers that are going to hurt someone else, or do you let the travesty happen that only you can stop? So it puts him in a real conundrum, and then that's half the fun if we get to explore that, is how he's going to deal with that.
So in your proposed ongoing, does Jason have a role?
Yes, he does. I don't know if it would be an ongoing, maybe it might be like a mini or something, but it's whatever DC can find the space for too. It's also the market. Is the market ready for a Firestorm series? Will people turn up and show up for it? I hope so, but that's
I hope so, but only if they're the baggy sleeves Firestorm version.
If you look at my story, that's what I got. I wanted the traditional classic Firestorm. Like, I think it's a cool look,
Right.
Like, I think you can tweak it a little and streamline it a little, but you got to keep the puffy sleeves, man. Yeah,
I agree 100% on that one. Now, the story does end with a kind of a to be continued part of it. So is there a story that continues into, or was that
we're talking about it internally at DC. Those are decisions that are above my pay grade. If it can't be settled there, we'll find an opportunity to pick it up. I've definitely been in talks with the editors about that.
I absolutely hope so. Mr. Culver, it's an absolute honor to speak with you, sir. And when you're ready to write Firestorm, come back in the show to talk some more Firestorm when the series
if that
happens.
Comes together, I'll come to you first, man. And now that I know that you're a super fan, like, this will be the spot.
That'd be absolutely perfect, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Oh, cool. Thanks for having me. Yep.